I'm excited to be here with you tonight. And recently we spent almost 3 months together, co-teaching a Wednesday night series. So I feel like you and I have gotten a real Zoom relationship this year.
That was awesome, by the way. That was really good.
Well, listen, it was so much fun for me, and I think the people who participated felt like it was good for them. So, but anyway, it's great being back with you, and I really appreciate you being willing to share a little bit about your faith journey with us. And as I was telling you earlier, we've known each other for a number of years. When did you come to Wake Forest Baptist Church?
I guess I don't know the year, but it would have been about 28 years ago.
Wow.
I know. Was that wow?
8 years.
He's older than I thought, or
No, because I think you've been here longer than I have. Let's see, I came in 95. So what is that? Five?
Yeah, it would have been a few years before that.
20, okay, so you were already here when I got here.
Yep.
And so we've known each other, but 20 plus years, or we've known of each other.
Yes.
And so I'm excited tonight to learn a little bit more about you, as I'm sure those who will have the blessing of being able to listen to this will as well. So let's just start where I always like to start, which is, where did your faith journey begin?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I grew up in a family. We went to church. So I kind of grew up in a rural area of Ohio, and so it was a small country church, non-denominational. It was about this sounds so old, Joe. It was about 2 miles. No, I guess it was more about 3 miles from our house. And so like in the summer, and it was on the top of a hill, and in the summer, we would ride and push our bikes up to the church to go to Vacation Bible School. And it was just it was a great little community growing up. Lots of adults looking after you, and just felt safe. And they also exposed their faith to us through that. So it started there. Certainly, every journey has some bumps along the way. So there, some bumps along the way as you get into your teens and 20s, and you start kind of figuring out, okay, where am I in this, and what is my faith? But it definitely started there. I was baptized in that church, and I still remember that very vividly.
Yeah, was this a particular denomination?
It was not. It was just called a Christian church. There was a federation. I would say, doctrinally, it was pretty similar to Wake Forest Baptist.
Okay.
But there was no denomination affiliation.
Gotcha. And how old were you when you made your profession of faith and got baptized?
I want to say it was 5th or 6th grade. It was before youth group, but I wasn't like one of the super young ones, that do that. But I do remember leaving church that day, and because the pastor had emphasized to me that I have a clean slate now. All my sins are forgiven, and I have a clean slate. And I remember thinking, wow, no sins. And then I was thinking, like, I wonder how long I can keep this going.
A do-over. You had a do-over.
Yeah, I was like, man, if I can just keep it straight from here on out, because I knew I hadn't until then. Then I thought, yeah, I could do this. So there was still some processing to do.
Now, did you have like a youth group, or
we did. So, single, there wasn't a staff. It was one pastor, but he kind of did everything. And boy, have a lot of respect for those people.
Hmm.
But he was great as a youth pastor. It was a lot of fun with us. And, one of the things I remember is for the older youth, he set up a pattern of us visiting other churches, other denominations, a Catholic church, a Jehovah's Witness.
Hmm.
We had no Muslims around us, but we visited a synagogue, and he just, he wanted to expose us to that and allow us to ask questions, and which as a youth, and to be kind of given that freedom and also responsibility was, I thought was exceptional on his part.
Looking, don't want to get too far ahead, but looking back, did that have an impact later on in your life? Being exposed to like that, to different religious beliefs and things.
It did. Yeah, I would say so, because you kind of got to work through, well, what does the love of God, what are the bounds? Are there bounds for the love of God? And they weren't practicing just like we were, and was that okay? And so I think that was a little bit of a exploration with safety net, but also it was, it as you moved into later years, it was a helpful
Mhm.
foundation, if you will.
And a certain amount of tolerance, I would imagine.
Yeah, because we covered, like I said, we stayed in the Judeo-Christian, but he certainly tested the boundaries within that.
Mhm.
So
That's interesting. So what, when you were, like, let's say in high school, kind of what were your interests?
well, I was in music.
Okay.
I played percussion in various bands. I ran track events, and I was kind of a technology fan, so I did various things with early computers, the very earliest computing kits and options that were available at that time. I was putting them together and learning some of the basics. So that was kind of where my interest was.
Interesting. So when high school's over, what happens next for you?
Well, I went to college at the University of Cincinnati, and so that's about 5 hours, 4.5 hours from where I grew up. And so that was a pretty big move for me. I still remember that feeling of looking out the dorm window and watching my parents drive away, and that was like that was a big deal.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of knew I wanted to stay in engineering. So, I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, and one of the people in my family that had an impact on me was an uncle, and he was a NASA engineer.
Oh,
and
wow.
and of course, in that time, that was like, a big deal. It's like having an NFL player in the family or something, in my mind.
Right. Sure, sure.
And like he got us on to, you know, various NASA grounds and kind of gave us backdoor tours and stuff. And so being able to see some of that stuff phenomenal. And so I guess the upshot was that was, I won't say he was the exclusive influence, but he was kind of a factor in me wanting to go to engineering. And he was also a devoted follower of Christ. So seeing faith and technology and science kind of integrated in a person at an early age was also, now that I look back on it, was helpful.
Mm-hmm. So you studied engineering at University of Cincinnati.
Yep, I did. And that's where Kathy and I met.
Okay.
And so we go back a ways.
And then how long was it before you guys got married after you got out of school?
A
Or
week.
did you do
A week.
Wow.
This part also sounds old by today's, but yeah, I mean, I think we dated for a year and a half in college, and I just felt pretty sure about her from day one. So yeah, I graduated in 1 week. We got married the next week, and we moved out of state the following week. So it's kind of we stacked up all the stress factors.
Now, where did you move to?
Florida, South Florida. So for a few
Oh,
years we lived in
okay.
South Florida, and then found our way to North Carolina.
Tell me about South Florida. Was that for jobs for both of you, or for her, or for you?
It was primarily on the basis of my job. We both worked down there. So this was in the late 80s, early 90s, late, yeah, a little of both. And boy, that was culturally, it was a huge change coming from the Midwest. And at that time, South Florida was pretty violent. There's a lot of drug crime, and so it was a cultural adjustment, for sure.
Yeah.
But so most of our friends knew this. Kathy's Catholic, and I'm from a non-denominational Christian church background. So finding something that worked for both of us was a factor. But when we were in South Florida, we started attending a Methodist church, and then we thought, well, that's kind of like a halfway in between thing. And while we were there, we made some very good friends, through that, and also met, some great leaders who ministered to us as young adults, and that was also very helpful. I mean, it's really helpful to have some people along the way.
Yes.
Somebody that's a few years ahead of you. Not so many, maybe, but a few years ahead of you. But kind of, they've seen some of the bumps, so they can warn you. So that was really good. It was a really good environment, and a great way for us to start.
Now, so you were doing engineering work, I guess, for a company down there?
I was working for a technology company down there, and initially, I don't know, for people that know South Florida, we lived up in Plantation Sunrise area, which is kind of west Fort Lauderdale, and my company that I was working for was initially in North Miami, so I was commuting down there, and eventually they relocated up a little closer. So yeah, so that was where we started, and it was a great place to start. But as we started to think a little more about kids, we kind of thought we wanted to be a little closer to where we were from, and just in a little bit calmer setting. And so North Carolina seemed like a good fit.
Did one of you have a job opportunity in North Carolina? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I did. You know, Kathy's a court reporter, so she's fortunate in that, you know, she can really go just about any, you know, any location, and they need her. They need her.
Okay. Okay.
So, pretty portable job. So, yeah. So then, yeah. So then it was another job with a telecommunications company that brought us up here, and we've stayed in the area ever since. We initially started when we first moved to Wake Forest. We went to the Methodist Church in Wake Forest and loved it. But as the kids started to come along, and we enrolled them in the preschool at Wake Forest Baptist, and so, you know, after a while, through the parents of young children, we started to interact there more, and it just started to feel like, hey, maybe this is where we're supposed to be. And so, you know, that's what honestly, that's what eventually brought us to Wake Forest Baptist.
So it was the We Care program.
It was.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not the first person who's ever said that.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, right? So you and Kathy started your family after you got back to North Carolina, or after you got to North Carolina.
That's right. That's
I
right.
got you.
We started all that up here.
I got you. So before we leave the Florida, looking back on Florida, anything that you would say was significant in your faith life that you attribute to that time?
Well, there was, as I said, there were two pastors there, a senior pastor and a junior pastor, I guess, or associate pastor, and he kind of worked with the young adults, and he and his wife. And I think, you know, I think that was just, we needed community, right? Like we were so relocated and we just kind of needed grounding in a community, and that provided that. And so, you know, I think by analogy, you know, Wake Forest is a lot like South Florida was at that time, in that you had just a huge influx of people, huge influx of young married people, young single people, and you know, so providing an environment for them is an important mission.
Right, right. Very good. So maybe talk for just a minute for those who don't know your children. Maybe you ought to, this might be a good time just to talk about, you know, who they are and ages, or kind of maybe just touch
Uh,
on the family.
Love to talk about their children.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have three. Caleb is our son, and he's the oldest. I'll mess up the ages, so I'll just go in, you know, roundish numbers, 30-ish. And he lives in Charlotte, and he and his wife Morgan, they live in Charlotte. And Lydia is our next. She's 28-ish, and she lives in Washington, D.C., and she works with the school system as a school psychologist. And Caleb works in advertising and marketing, and he works with a banking company in Charlotte. And Mariah is our youngest, and Mariah this month is finishing up her master's. She's done her thesis on in biology, conservation biology, and particularly like spatial modeling, like modeling environment and weather changes. And so lots of interesting areas for her to go into. So not sure where she'll land, you know, she's kind of at that, you know, that wild moment where you're graduating and you're interviewing and you just don't know what the future is. So
The last one to get employed.
that's right. Right.
It's always a good feeling, right? Well, very good. Very good. Well, talk a little bit about your experience since you've been at Wake Forest. You said 28 years, I think. That's a long time. What are some of the, as you think back over those 20 years, what are some of the significant events and things that you feel like have been important on your faith journey? Anything in particular jump out at you?
Um, well, the first thing I thought of actually involves you. um, because so when we first came to Wake Forest Baptist, I found it an intimidating church. It was affiliated with a seminary. I mean, oh my gosh. And a lot of the people that you just bumped shoulders with in the halls or that were teaching Sunday school class had their PhD in theology. And, so when we came here, I was kind of like, I'm not saying anything. so, for a number of years, we were very happy going, plugging into stuff and connecting to people because everybody was very friendly. I just found that aspect kind of intimidating. Um, and so I was not involved in ways that I had been previously, for instance, in the Methodist Church. I did teach a Sunday school class at the Methodist Church, but I didn't feel qualified to continue that. And what happened was, especially as Caleb he was approaching like his, his tween years, and I remember thinking about this and thinking, what am I modeling? What am I, in what area am I serving or giving back? And I realized that for a couple of years, I'd really just been kind of, maybe I was using, maybe I wasn't intentionally using it, but the outcome was I was not not chipping in, not jumping in any way. And then I thought about, boy, this is what I'm modeling for my kids. So that was on my mind. And then I think one day in worship, you made an announcement that you needed, anybody interested in just kind of filling in as a Sunday school teacher and, kind of back to be on the backfill for a Sunday school teacher if they wanted to get involved in. And I got in touch with you and you gave me a class. But
I
that was
remember that.
so the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, I knew my own inability, so I had no problem offering it up to other people. I was not intimidated about you at all.
Well, that's my hallmark.
I knew if I could do it, you could certainly do it. How many years ago was that?
Oh my gosh. It would a little bit under 20. Sound about right? I think that's about
I think that's the new definition of backfill.
You just made it sound so natural and like, hey, it's not, it's not a big deal. And
Well, I think the truth be known, you had been substituting and doing a little backfill already.
I may have done some. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why you got on the radar. But I don't know that I knew that you had taught at the Methodist Church.
Yeah.
Was that also an adult class?
It was. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. What caused that to happen, you think?
Yeah, that's a good question because I did not prior to that. We were we've been nurtured the whole, there was maybe some of the old timers in Wake Forest would remember there were some wonderfully kind people there. One of them was a woman named Lydia Lowy. And so at the time we came into the Methodist Church, she was in her 80s. And she started coming to our class, and we were a class mostly of young adults. And I mean, her husband had recently passed away, but she just had a love of life and of living, and the attitude of a servant, in giving back to the community. And uh, she invited us to her house, and we had her to our house. Just, she was just a nurturing person, and that's part of the reason how our second child is named Lydia.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah, yeah, and she got to hold her before she passed away, which meant a lot to me.
Mm. So that was part of you teaching?
Well, I can't remember honestly how I got involved into it, but she was definitely part of what made it special,
Yeah, yeah,
because it was largely a younger adult class,
right.
and she brought experience and a young attitude. So
Well, I can just say from afar, I would say you've had a very vibrant um, Sunday school teaching experience at Wake Forest Baptist Church. I mean, one of the most highly attended classes over those years, and people really love you, and say so many good things about your teaching. And I finally got a chance to see you teach when we did that class together this year, and I learned so much just working with you during that time. So thank
uh,
you for all your use of your gifts there.
thank you. It's very kind. But that goes both ways.
Yeah, yeah,
When
that's
I quit
awesome.
teaching, I'm coming to your class.
Beyond your teaching ministry, any other things particularly that have been, kind of like high water marks for you? Just, you know, anything else jump out at you that you've done? I know you've been involved in some leadership roles and things, but I know you've also been involved in a lot of ministries. So I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to talk about there that has been significant or
Well,
particularly significant.
yeah, the community garden has been special to me. I think we're in the 6th or 7th year of that
Hmm.
now, and Jean's done a phenomenal job of providing us some mentoring there, and a lot of food has been provided to local needs, and also a lot of good relationships.
Hmm.
So that's definitely a special one, and one I still try to get out to as I can.
Hmm.
Um, the work that we do with Ryan as part of the spiritual formation
Hmm.
team uh, means a lot to me. Uh, and I would say some of the experiences I had as a deacon are very memorable
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, definitely some of those.
Awesome. Awesome. One question I like to always ask people is about spiritual practices, things that they do that, they just have found have really helped keep them near to God. And is there anything like that that you find? And, maybe, you're doing it for a while and you haven't done it. I don't know, but any particular spiritual practices or routines or anything like that that you find helpful?
For me, yeah. For me, morning. Um, and I don't know if everybody does this, and some people have different feelings about it. But so I have some devotional material that I try to read, and that rotates a little bit. And I go through phases, I guess. There's periods of time where I'll kind of latch on to one format of prayer and kind of stay with that for a while. Right now, I'm really enjoying the examine prayer, which Ryan had introduced to our class. And, it's just kind of a pattern there that I find helpful. And I'll tell you the one thing I do, I don't know how many people do this. Well, actually, okay. one thing I do, and then one hazard I have. So the one thing I do that's really helpful is I have a timer on the watch and I set it. And because when I guess when I go into that, I don't want to be thinking like, oh gosh, I wonder how long have I been in prayer, or or have I been in prayer long enough, or anything like that. So have I allowed enough time for meditate, just reflecting, maybe on something I read, and so I kind of worked to a number, and I just click it on my watch, and then I don't think about it, and I that helps me a lot. That, to me, that's really been very helpful.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you want to hear my hazard?
Let me hear your hazard.
Okay, this is a hazard for Sunday school teachers, and the hazard for Sunday school teachers is that or for me, that I'm reading everything through the lens of, oh, I wonder if that might be a good thing to bring up in class, and so
Yeah.
like, and if I'm not careful, that's just the front of my mind on everything. Like, and I could experience, I don't know, a thought, and instead of celebrating that or thinking about that, and reflecting, is that God speaking to me? My temptation is to go, oh, I should write that down and we should talk about it in class. And so I try to intentionally have boundaries there. I need them. So
I think that's so insightful, and it makes me wonder how vocational pastors, people who do this, how do they worship? How does worship leaders worship?
yeah, right. Because it's almost like an occupational hazard that you you can't stop looking through the prep lens. Um, so yeah, for somebody that uh, vocationally does this, that would be an interesting question to
Yeah.
dig into.
Well, I think it reminds us to be in prayer for our Sunday school teachers, because I think this is true for all of us.
Mhm.
I also think about church leaders. You know, church can become like a place of kind of doing business if you're not careful, and you can lose touch with what we really come here for, which is worship, right? We want to come here to be close to God, but the institutional side of church, particularly for church leaders, can really blur those lines. So I think it's another reason, and another specific reason, to pray for church leaders who deal with that.
I agree, and I so appreciate that, because and all of us should, because in a way, it not in a way, it's an act of service, so that everybody does not have to have that as part of their experience. You know,
Yeah.
to create this, this space or this time that we come into, is uh, there's people giving up time behind the scenes to make that possible for you.
Maybe we can start a group for recovering Sunday school teachers.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, here's another question I always like to ask about this part of the interview is, do you have a favorite Bible verse? And it's okay if you don't, but do you have a favorite Bible verse, or one currently that's your favorite?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Because there is a little bit of both. Um, so if you and I got in a car and we drove 10 hours to that country church I was talking about, There's a patio in the back, and there's bricks on it, and the bricks were to help fund a new building that they did. And my brother and I bought one for my sister who's passed away, and it just has her name and Isaiah, is it 40:31? The one where it says, "Those who trust in the Lord shall fly up like on eagle's wings." And
Run and not grow weary, walk and not faint.
yes, that verse. And that verse always makes me think of her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a powerful one.
Yeah.
All right, switching gears a little bit. What does Brian do for fun?
So I'm a bit of a nerd, Joe, so I'm afraid this isn't going to sound. I, um, I like to read. I try to, I do some exercise things. I'll run a couple times a week, or go to the YMCA. So I enjoy doing that. I I have this aspiration of becoming a blueberry farmer at some point. So we have some used to be pasture land, and now I've planted I don't know, maybe 150 blueberry plants on it, and some elderberry bushes. And so it's just a hobby, but I enjoy it.
Do the deer allow them to mature?
Deer are my worst enemy. They don't bother. They don't bother the blueberries so much.
Oh, okay.
The birds love the blueberries. The deer love the elderberry plants, and they would strip them down if they had free access to them. So yeah, deer are a challenge in this area.
Any particular types of genre of reading that you particularly enjoy? Is that something that most of us wouldn't know about you?
I enjoy science fiction,
Okay.
uh, and some fantasy type literature. And I like reading books about faith, and that uh, pull me in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are, if I go into a library or into Kindle Unlimited, those are the areas where I go.
Very good. Very good. So here's a question. If you could sum up in a few words what your faith means and the difference it's made in your life, what would you say?
Well, I have this feeling that I think we all or most of us carry this kind of conviction that there's something there beyond what I can access right now. Kind of another domain. And and so I feel like I'm always trying to touch that, and there are moments that it seems like I do, or I have, and most of those have been through my faith as a follower of Jesus. And so that's where I turn to that. I mean, I think everybody's got to look at everything around and go, wow, this is incredible. Either we are just phenomenally lucky to be here, and that in itself can invoke a sense of awe, or we're not lucky, but were planned, and you know, and then it takes you somewhere else. And no, you know, and you know, we can't. I mean, I have a lot. You know, we all have friends who don't have a faith, uh, and I can understand, to some degree where they're coming from, but they also share that same reverence, if you will, for creation or the fact that we're here. And I think when you go a step further and go, and what if it's not just an accident? Then what does that mean? And what does that what's the value of other people? What's my value? And I don't know where to explore that outside of faith.
Yeah, right.
Uh, so it's great. I mean, it's just to me, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. When you think about your faith journey, Brian, is there anything that in particular that just jumps out at you that you're particularly grateful for?
Uh, I'm grateful for people who shared it. I mentioned that uncle who's an
Yeah.
engineer, and he very openly, shared his. And I don't mean in an an overwhelming way or a put off, way that was off putting, but he and my aunt, his wife, um, just had this way of investing in people. Like, uh, I have 11 cousins in this part of the family, and when she passed away, we all came from, and we had scattered across the eastern half of the country by that point, but we all came back, and we were sitting there, we were talking, and it was funny. Each of us thought we were her favorite niece or nephew. And we were each pretty sure of it. And I just thought, you know, that was a beautiful gift to leave behind.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
And
before I go ahead, keep
no,
going.
sorry, I was just reflecting on that.
One of the things I have learned from teaching with you is that you have the gift of being able to allow pause to last longer than I do. So there's that. Before I kind of move to conclusion here, what is it that I should be asking you that I haven't asked you, or what else would you want to just add before we kind of wrap up here about your faith journey? Anything else you would want to add, or a question maybe I should have asked?
Well, I'm excited about the future. I, you know, we're coming out of 2 years of weirdness, and um, so that drove or drives a lot of change
Mhm.
everywhere. Certainly, it has in church. I mean, what we're doing right now, would have been less probable 2.5
Right.
years ago. Um, but that's just kind of a surface thing. Culturally, there's probably less societal push to go, to attend church. It's more considered an option. So one of the things that I find tremendously exciting is seeing the younger adults there, because I know they're they're there because of choice. And and so, I mean, I look at them and see a lot to be excited about.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I I think God will do good things with that. I
Yeah.
think we just have to steward it.
Yeah. Well said. Well, Brian, I always like to ask people before we wrap up, what is it we can pray for you?
Uh, well, I think maybe just keep, that I can continue to teach. I'm, you know, I always think of like, I was always struck by like Paul when, Paul, you read his life and it's, like, you know, he's shipwrecked, he's jailed, he's, all these things going on. And I can't ever remember reading a letter where he goes, would you all put me on the prayer list? I, I, that just didn't seem to occur to him when he wrote his letters. And so I guess to a certain extent, I look at that as a model.
Mhm.
Just the, like everyone else, I pray for the people I love. And
Sure.
and so I think that's enough.
Okay. Well, Brian, this has been great. It's actually been fun
It
just
has.
hanging out with you for a little bit. Appreciate you being willing to do this. And um, I, I think somewhere along the line, the seeds of your ministry were planted, and I think many people have benefited from that. And certainly, we hope that you'll be able to continue doing that and feeling that God's leading you to do that. And I just thank you for your friendship. It's special, and thank you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you, Joe, and same here. It's definitely felt both ways.